there, which is similar to this. And I'm a Democrat, Bob is Republican. And so the second term, I was made chair because the Democrats were in the majority for the first time in like 100 years. And then 2 years after that, the Republicans regained the majority and he became chair and I became his ranking member. And then 2 years after that, Democrats were back in. So we just flipped chairs back and forth.
Yeah, for 10 years, every
Yeah.
term we flipped.
Yes, which was interesting, but we learned to work together really well. And one thing that we did notice is that agriculture is very nonpartisan most of the time, which is a relief because so many different committees are totally partisan and it makes it untenable. So we've been best friends for that long.
18 years or something?
Exactly. So after we retired from the House, I got a call from Council of State Governments. The conferences to which we have been going for years and years and years, because it's a great resource. And they said, we understand that you're out of the House. Do you want to be our agriculture and rural affairs policy consultant? And I jumped at the chance because I love the organization and I felt that it really is good for legislators. So since then, we are sharing the job. And so we put on conferences, we put on policy summits, we travel around to state house visits, which is why we're here. We go to all of the state houses in the 11 northeastern states, from Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, all the way up to Maine, 5 eastern Canadian provinces, and darn it, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So, and so we get to talk agriculture, we get to tell them what other states are doing, and we get to find out from you what you're doing. Do you want to talk about CSG?
Yeah, CSG was actually started here in the East in 1936 or something to that effect. And it has since expanded. We have an Eastern region, and Tara described that. But there's a Midwest, a Far West, and a Southern region as well. And nobody asked Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands if they wanted to be part of it, and especially the South. So we did. And they happily joined us, and we've been here ever since. But the Council of State Governments is the only legislative organization that includes all 3 branches. So the judiciary can be part of it. And now Carolyn Partridge is part of this
she's a
with
judge.
us because she's an assistant judge. And she had been active for 25 years in the group. But we also have the agencies that are welcome to be part of it. Mm-hmm. And every year at our annual meeting, we always have the Commissioner or Secretary of Agriculture ride the bus with us when we take a tour of a farm or whatever we're going to do. So
we're a nonprofit, and we survive by membership dues. So all of the states pay dues for the services we provide. So in effect, all of you are members. I mean, you can call us up if you want to maybe pass these out. This is my personal telephone number and everything like that.
Yeah.
Call us up, find out, and say, what is Massachusetts doing on this bill? Or tell me, who is the best person to talk to on this issue? And that's what we do. What we also do is we do trainings. We're pretty famous for trainings. We have a thing called Eastern Leadership Academy, which usually 2 or 3 people from each state are selected each year to go to a 4-day, all-intensive leadership training in Philadelphia, completely covered, the cost of which is completely covered. And I would highly recommend that you all look into maybe applying for that, because it's really an experience that you will never forget.
It is wonderful. We both did it when we were in the legislature.
At different times,
yeah. We 2 years apart, I think.
Yeah.
You need to be recommended by your speaker.
Or not necessarily, I wasn't.
Well,
Because the speaker and I didn't get along at the time, so she never would have recommended.
the rule is by the speaker.
Yeah,
I got my recommendation from her.
so, yeah, but I would highly recommend it. It's really an experience and you get to meet people that you will be friends with for life, which is always nice.
And that's August, late
That's
August.
in August every year.
Perhaps someone
And the-
has anybody been to that conference?
I don't think that anyone has, no, because we keep going to that every year because we're involved. So we get to see all the new crowd,
Yeah.
which is nice. The deadline for applications is May 15th, I believe. You can go to the CSG-ERC, which is Eastern Regional Conference website, and look up Eastern Leadership Academy. There is also a national, it's called Toll Fellows, that is in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yes.
Every year. And that brings people from all over the country, from every state. And that is more intense and more honorific, I would say, than the ELA. But both are great training, great training. And also, I don't know whether you have had trainings recently in,
There was some a couple of weeks ago.
yeah, you did, that we sponsored those. Council of State Government sponsored those in-house trainings. We bring the trainers here and free of charge to the legislatures, which is great.
Discrimination prevention.
Exactly, that's the one that you did.
Yeah.
But we also do them on compromise and leadership and how to deal with the press and things like that. So if you ever want to do something, just let us know and we'll bring someone in and sponsor it. All you have to do is provide a room and the time.
Right.
You know, yeah, it's really, really good.
You know, one of the more popular ones is, how do you speak on camera?
Oh, my gosh. And everyone, you know, especially the people in Washington, they say, oh, I know how to do that, you know, and they look at themselves on camera and they look totally ridiculous, you know. And so there's a way to be trained. We highly recommend that. What we do, Bob and I, is we listen to the various committees on our State House visits. We find out what the issues are, not only that they're dealing with, but that they think are important to ag. And we compile lists and then we determine with our chairs and co-chairs of our committee what topics we're going to be dealing with at our annual meeting based on the input from our trips. And so
Of
that's
course.
why we're here, so that we can find out what it is you want to hear, because we work for you. So we highly recommend that. We also do policy summits last year, and I tried to get people from Vermont to come, but no one did. We did, and this is from our magazine perspectives. That's just one of the articles about our policy summit that was held in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was on farm labor and the difficulties of getting it, how to find it, what needs to be changed as far as immigration policy is concerned, the H-2A program and things like that. So,
It was farm and processing labor.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that was fascinating. It was a 2-day, all-intensive thing, and it was fun. This year, we're doing one jointly with our Energy and Environment Committee on PFAS, which is going to be in Providence, Rhode Island at the end of April. And that, I don't know if this committee deals with it, but I know that it's important everywhere. Thank you. Oh, that was my notes. That's from Maine. But PFAS is very, very, it's a hot issue right now. What to do with it, how to deal with it, et cetera, et cetera. So we've already had several webinars on it and a breakout session at our annual meeting. So,
Do you mind if we ask questions?
of course.
You
Yes, yes, that's right.
Is there a way to find some of the results from your previous meeting, especially on the H2A and,
Well, we have the article sort of sums up what we talked about.
yeah.
Yeah. We didn't come up with a resolution. Did we come up with a resolution
We
during
did
that one?
not.
Yeah, we were thinking about it, trying to force the federal government to actually make changes to the H-2A program, especially concerning dairy. Because as you all know, the H2A program is only 5 months out of the year and dairy is year round. And it doesn't work. And so that's why there are so many undocumented workers on all the dairy farms in all of our states. And everyone knows it's going on and no one's doing anything about it. But, they're living under a cloud. They can be raided anytime. And it's just not good. It's not a good situation. But it requires immigration change. And that seems to be not the will of the Congress right now.
And so there's not sort of like a fact sheet for like legislators in the state level to, as a result of this.
No, we did not come up with that because we didn't come up with any solutions. We were just investigating what the problems were and trying to come up with solutions, which it's on the national level, not a state level, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Thank you. Or maybe like even just, of course, this isn't a solution in it, but, helping guide us as legislators to communicate with our.
Exactly. We should do that. We should do a wrap up.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful person speaker coming in from the Department of Labor. And she was talking about all of these programs that they do for training and attracting people and getting people to work in agriculture. No one even knew that existed. And it's really a resource that was helpful. I can get you that information, which is good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so this summer, our annual meeting is going to be July 28th through the 31st, and it's going to be in Providence, Rhode Island.
No, it's going to be in Baltimore.
Baltimore. Oh, that's right. It's the PFAS is going to be in Providence, Rhode Island. I get confused with cities. But they have put on a great show. We had a Maryland annual meeting 5 years ago, and it's great. The crab. You want to eat crab? You go to Maryland.
Eastern, CSG East?
Just CSG East. And so there are only going to be like 350 people there. It's not like NCSL where it's a huge convention and there are booths and there are people all over. What we love about CSG East is that we're regional. The things that concern people in Vermont also concern people in Maine and Vermont and New York. We're small enough so that we have a completely different type of agriculture than Colorado or Texas or California. And so while national conferences are great, they have really, when it comes to agriculture, have very little to do with what we are doing here. We're the small farms, small dairies, small, specialty crops, things like that. And so it's a different kettle of fish completely. So, and it's nice to talk to people in the same boat, like Carolyn, Representative Partridge. I mean, we were buddies for years and years and years. I still talk to her all the time because we met at CSG, and there are a lot of people like that you're going to really appreciate knowing. And it's also a resource when you get to know them, you can call them up and say, what are you doing, on an issue? Are you having any problems with it?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of times in the past when we'd say, somebody had that problem before. I think it was Connecticut. Let me call Kevin.
Yeah.
And it's really been good that way in terms of networking and why you reinvent the wheel if somebody's already gone through that and we know at least what doesn't work.
Yeah. And we are good at introductions. We introduce you to people, whether it be fellow legislators or executive branch. So, yeah. I see, speaking of which, that you're dealing with the neonics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were dealing with that way back when. It's a never-ending issue, it seems.
Yep. John?
Just on that, so
Yeah.
is Quebec part of this?
Quebec is part of this,
So
as
you would
are,
know somebody maybe in Quebec, because we've heard there as a province, they restricted them, sort of
right.
close to banning, I guess.
Are they the only ones in the region?
Ontario,
New York
too.
did it.
New York, and how is it going for them?
New York just started and we
Okay.
don't know yet, but Quebec's done it since 2019 and they're starting to see some positive changes with
Oh, they are.
bee
The
colony.
bees,
health,
right.
And they're not seeing a real detriment to crop yield.
Really?
But we haven't heard about mites and other bugs that.
Yeah,
affect
exactly.
crops. So that,
right.
so we're sort of, Henry and I were talking about that
The
sort
poor
of,
bees.
we're not really sure what that means, so.
Right. Well, we know Dee Dee Barrett in New York, and she could probably fill you in on what's going over there, so.
So that attendance at that meeting, in the schedules of Baltimore.
Yes.
If anybody here was interested in going to that, they would want to talk to the speaker as well. Is that typically?
Exactly, because there's a registration fee. Most legislators have budgeted money to go to these things for legislators. And most people don't know that that exists, don't know it's a resource for you. So what you do is you ask to go. And I think the earlier the better, because they have a set budget, and then when the budget is gone, they don't have any more. Yeah. But if there is no funding available, let us know and we can help. Because I know that when we were in the House in New Hampshire, we were making $100 a year. And so we weren't really going to be paying for travel and, registration fees for conferences.
Yeah, and in the entire time I was in the House, I never got turned down for going to a conference.
Right.
I did have one time when the speaker said, in advance, I can only pay half of it. My money's almost gone.
Right.
So I footed the bill for the rest,
But I'm sure that that's true here as well. And Vermont has always been a supporter of CSG. We even had a wonderful conference based here up in Burlington back in 2010, 2011, something like that. It was great.
yeah.
It was great.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah,
I was going to say 8 or 9, but
it could have been. Yeah, but they did a good job. And each state tries to outdo themselves. We go around from state to state, different states each year, which is nice. But it's a great group of people.
This past year, we were in Toronto. Year before, it was New Hampshire. Year before that was
Pittsburgh,
Pittsburgh.
Pickles in Pittsburgh. Yeah. Heinz. And football and baseball. Anyway, so that's who we are. That's what we do. So what are you guys dealing with? What topics are you talking about this year?
Let's see, I can tell you what our agenda is like today. After we hear from you this afternoon, we've got the state Association of Conservation Districts is coming in.
Mhm.
And they'll be just giving us an update on what they've been doing and perhaps having a budget request for next year.
May I ask who funds the conservation districts?
There is some state funding.
Is it out of counties or is it?
Oh, it's state, yeah, we don't have county,
Mhm.
our county government in Vermont is almost non-existent.
Right,
Essentially the courts and
yeah.
law enforcement, sheriffs.
New Hampshire's basically the same.
Is it? Yeah,
But we have our jails and, courts and
yeah,
sheriffs
yeah.
And nursing homes.
So,
and nursing homes, yes.
so we're similar in other ways,
Mhm.
not just the fact that we don't get paid as much as some states paid their.
Right, exactly. No, I know.
The and they do have a certain amount of money coming from the state, but I think it's not historically been an awful lot.
Uh-huh.
And then we are going to hear from someone testifying on H706, which is the bill you
Mhm.
mentioned,
Mhm.
neonicotinoids. We have a couple of other bills we've been working on. One, we'll hear testimony tomorrow, enact removing regulatory barriers for working lands.
And what are the regulatory barriers? I looked at that and was wondering what exactly they were talking about.
Act 250.
Oh, Act 250.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes.
Barriers, plural, but I think it's largely.
Right. That was a huge initiative back in the day.
Maybe others would like to chime in on things that we are or might be, or you hope we'll be working on. Because we don't get to everything, obviously.
Right.
I think they're going to be, by the end of the biennium, we're into the 800, well into the 800. So be approaching 1,000 anyway, bills that are ultimately introduced.
Mhm.
Maybe a couple hundred, if that would be.
Right.
Yeah.
Unlike New Hampshire,
Yeah.
where there are this year 1,400 bills that were filed, and every single one has to have a hearing. Everyone has to have an executive committee, executive session on it, and every single one has to go on before
The
the
floor.
full session on the floor for a vote up or down.
And how long is your session?
It lasts January through the end of June.
Oh,
Thank heavens for consent calendars. But I mean, just scheduling all the hearings for all of these bills. Some committees have like 150 bills. They have to somehow schedule with from January through March and then crossover to the Senate, then you get another batch, but it's tough. But it's interesting that you can choose which ones you
Yeah.
want to hear and
Yeah,
which ones
that's
you don't.
foreign to us.
Yeah.
How about other states? Do they?
Most of them have the ability to choose, pick and choose, and that is the power of the chair. That gives them the ability to select and decide. Not that chair, no. And so in New Hampshire, the role of the chair is pretty much just a scheduler because you have to do with them all. You don't have a choice. So it's very interesting. And of course,
$100.
$100, yeah, but there are 400 representatives in New Hampshire. Yes. The third largest English speaking body
Yes,
in the world.
legislative body. Yeah.
Legislative body in the world. Yeah.
Representative Cole?
One issue we work with here a lot in our committee, especially this year now, is food access. And we've been talking a lot about school food
Yes.
access. And that has a huge intersection with the Farm Bill and the requirements in the national nutrition requirements.
Yes.
And I'm just curious about your work there in the past and how legislatures have come together to kind of
Right.
advocate for reform to the Farm Bill.
Yeah. Well, the Farm Bill is something that we deal with all the time when it
Yeah.
comes up. We had a briefing on it with Debbie Stabeno's staffers in Washington. They came to our annual meeting and talked about what they expected to have, because her staff, she's chair, her staff are the ones who actually write it. So it's like from the horse's mouth, we were hearing what they're planning on doing. Of course, as we all know, nothing has happened yet again. It keeps being punted down the road, the date,
A political process.
It is a political process and it doesn't seem to be working, as are some of the other things in Washington. They don't seem to be working. But we as a region, we normally have resolutions about issues like specialty crops and insurance on those, things to help our small farms, dairy. So we come up with things that our whole region wants. We do a resolution that's then sent to our congressional delegations saying our region wants this to happen. And so it has a little bit more weight because it's not just the state of New Hampshire, the state of Vermont requesting something. It's the entire region.
And if I can add to that, the last Farm Bill 5 years ago, we did pass a resolution at our committee on the Farm Bill and what we wanted in it and didn't want in it. And the Congressional Farm Committee, House, was holding a hearing over in Cobleskill, New York. Tara and I went over with resolutions in hand.
We gave it
And
to
we
you.
not only handed out the resolutions, but we testified. So, so that was from the northeastern states. And something we've often said, Vermont as a state doesn't have much weight in Washington. But when we take
New York,
northeastern
Pennsylvania,
states,
Maine.
we're 22% of Congress. So we in fact have some pull down there
Right.
if we come together as 11 states.
And so at the annual meeting, we come up with these resolutions, which is the part of the business that we as a committee do. We take votes on it. And we all agree or don't agree on what it is that we want to stress and pass it on. So
And we also, as a committee, have not only agriculture, but rural affairs. So any rural issue is
we dealt.
fair game for
We
us.
dealt for years with rural broadband. I mean, the never ending problem of not having connectivity in rural areas. Even with the billions and trillions of dollars that have been thrown at the issue for the last 15 years, we can't get them to actually build. And it's upsetting. So there was just recently, interestingly, a move by the FCC to force utilities who own the poles, utility poles, to allow access to people who want to put on, fiber optic and things like that onto the poles. Because that was the stumbling block a lot before. Every single wire that you put on had to be negotiated on every single pole. And it would take 2-3 years just for one town to get that negotiation done.
Massachusetts had a horrible time with
Oh my gosh, that poor guy. He was in charge of doing Western Massachusetts, getting high-speed internet there. And it took him, and that's all he did, but it took him like 10 years of dealing with these companies who had no interest, no motivation to actually make it go faster. It's no skin off their nose. And it was just this roadblock that prevented it from happening. But this roadblock evidently is going away, which is good. Anyway,
Representative Brown.
Have you heard of this New England, Feeds New England?
yes, I have heard of that. Yes.
That would be a perfect thing.
That really would be. Yes,
We had a bunch of hearings on that.
good idea.
Yeah, and while you're suggesting that, we end up with quite a list, because we go through all states and ask them all the same question, and you end up with a huge list. And the way we look at what do we think are the ones that affect most states. If you get it from one state, it's tougher to bring than if you've gotten it from 10. But we end up, after we've made some recommendations and winnowed it down, letting our chairs, who are legislators in 2 different states, let them choose the final topics.
Right. With our recommendation, but that one, the New England Feeds New England is a good one. Could you, or maybe Sidonia, provide us with people who have testified, who might be good as speakers at a session on this at our end? Good. Because, it may be a good topic, but if you don't have interesting people who can talk about it and get people interested, it's good for nothing. One thing that we're going to be talking about in August or July is rural communities, why some are dying and why some are thriving, and what is the difference, and what can you do to save them? What is the secret ingredient? And there are some really, really interesting things that towns are doing around that everybody could do.
Right.
I think the only thing that will save it is the lower taxes.
That is one thing,
You
yes.
cannot keep spending this money.
Right.
It's
Right.
gonna blow up some.
Right. Well, you're talking to New Hampshire people. You forget we have no taxes.
It's a cost of living.
We have property taxes, we have business taxes, we have estate taxes, it's just the nickel and diming.
Yep.
You have to pay for it somehow, but you can't kill people with it either. No. Interestingly, the rural communities, the thing that tends to get people, number one, to stay after graduating from high school in a town, to want to stay, to want to move into are things like sense of community or like an artist community is arts or a big thing. Music is a big thing. Food. Like my little town of Walpole, New Hampshire was dying. And then Larry Burdick moved up from New York and started chocolate making.
I love that chocolate.
I know. And it's now everywhere in the country or most cities. And people move to town because of the chocolate and because of the restaurant he built and the little grocery store that has specialized meats and cheeses and stuff. It attracted people who wouldn't stay if it were just like a Market Basket or Shaw's grocery store. You have to have the good cheeses and the good meats and everything like that in order to attract them. And it just changed the town completely. And that was a chocolate maker.
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns was there before, but I mean, there wasn't really anything to see for people, just the fact that he was in the town, but, which is nice. But yeah, it's things like, murals on buildings, walls downtown. Keene just did that, and it's a big, big draw for people to come and see all the wonderful murals. So surprisingly, it's stuff like that, but it all stems from a sense of community and to want to do this. And it usually takes like one ringleader or cheerleader to start it up and get everyone excited. And that just changes the whole tenor of the towns. So we'll be talking about that. And yeah. Anything else?
One of the things we do at our annual meeting that our legislators really appreciate, our first session, we go around the room, state by state, province by province, and someone speaks for 3-4 minutes on what's going on in their state. And people, what legislators find it really interesting, what's going on in the other states.
In the committee, like in agriculture.
Yes.
It's not just.
Yeah,
everything in general.
it's not wide open.
No. And so many times they mention a bill that they got passed and people are going, whoa, that's exactly what we need, and so they share the legislation and we change it to our own, RSA's format and come up with great ideas. So it's a sharing of ideas like that. That's fun.
In that same session, at the end of it, we have someone that works with us from Washington, DC, who gets up and talks about what's going on in the Agriculture Committee in both House and Senate in Washington, and how is the politics playing into that.
And how it's going to affect the states.
Right.
Because it always does. It always trickles down adversely or the good. So.
I would think maple syrup, because you got Quebec, Vermont, New York.
Yeah.
And a bunch of smaller places like New Hampshire would be the commodity, and climate change would be a big deal.
We actually went up to Quebec. That was one of our locations, Quebec City. And we had a session on maple syrup.
Yes.
Boy, are they protective of their maple. You would not believe. It's sort of like the mafia up there, with the maple. The control, the volume. I mean,
One of the comments from Quebec that really stood out was, we control the price.
and they do. So, I mean, we're just small-time players down here compared to them. That was an eye-opener. And then we talked about dairy and their quota system up there. And we would go driving up through Vermont and northern New Hampshire to get to Quebec and see all of the dismal farms and the barns falling down and unpainted. And you go up there and there are Cadillacs in the driveway. There was one dairy farm where they actually were milking 60 cows, I think, and they had a carousel, automated milking carousel there. Painted barns, air conditioning. I mean, it was insane, the difference.
Yeah.
But they can make a living because they know how much they're going to be selling. And they set the price. And then we're trying to change that by making them change their way of doing things. So it's difficult. It's difficult. But how many dairy farms do you have left? In this state?
Yeah, 500-ish.
Because there were 1,200 when we started in Vermont.
Same amount of cows.
That's exactly, I know. And the farms are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I know. Its size is everything.
Yeah.
And yet the topography of both Vermont and New Hampshire and the other smaller states, too many hills in between. You can't have open grazing and the huge barns. It doesn't equate that way. So, but yeah, I know.
And
Completely
You,
different thing.
you had mentioned climate change. We did one 2 years ago on climate change and its impact on agriculture. That I thought was a great session.
Yeah.
We brought in the director of the Northeast Climate Hub to give a presentation. And in fact, we had two presenters on it at the same time. And the other was the Secretary of Agriculture from Pennsylvania. And I thought they did a great job.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And we had another study done, well, we had information from a lot of the regions
Yes.
about what they foresee as being a problem with agriculture, what to look out for, what crops are not going to be able to be grown, what can be grown, what to expect. And they pretty unanimously, except in California where there's no water, or the Arizona, said there won't be that much of a change.
Yeah, there's 8 regions, contacted all 8 climate hubs. The climate hub in California wouldn't talk to us because we were asking too much of them. But the other 7 answered. And only the Southwest, which is Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, said they were negative. They said, if we don't get water down the Colorado River, there is no
Big
agriculture.
trouble.
But the rest of them all said, there's going to be more risk, but we will grow everything in the future that we grow today.
Because we had heard that maple was going to be gone here in our region because it was going to keep, going up. It was going to be too hot and it would never run again. But they said, not much.
And California,
true.
who wouldn't talk to us? Well, we've got to get something from California. It's too big an ag state. So I went to the Farm Bureau, and the executive director spent quite a bit of time with me. And he was probably the most positive of everyone, and they have no water. They actually did this year, and
They do now,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. A little too much, just a
all of
little.
which is running out into the ocean.
it'll be gone soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But California, they said, in the future, there are crops that we don't make any money on. We're going to stop growing, just going to stop. Alfalfa was one he specifically mentioned. And we're going to grow high value crops, almonds, rice.
But those require a lot of water.
They do.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of water.
Yes. However, if you look at what's happening with the almond industry, they used to flood every one of the orchards. They don't do that anymore. It's all drip irrigation.
Mm.
And they're using half the water they used to. But there is a second issue. That water they used to use recharged the aquifer. Now with the drip irrigation, they're not recharging the aquifer.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, California is going to let some ground go fallow as well, just so they don't use so much water. And they're building at least one new reservoir is under construction now, and there will be a couple more in the future.
And getting back to the PFAS we were talking, the biosolids that our farms have been using for a long time. Evidently, that is not so good. And that seems to be the crux of bit of the problem. And so how to clean that up, how to get it out of the systems. And I know some animals have actually had to be culled because of the, in their body presence of PFAS. So it's not good for agriculture. And so that's why we are sharing with the policy, some of that's coming up, because agriculture has
A vested interest.
vested interest is right. So anyway. So that's about it.
Well, thank you for coming in. I know we've been trying to have you come in for last year.
Exactly.
This year,
Yeah.
we had to postpone and reschedule a couple times, so.
We normally come in when other people from CSG in New York are here, from the other policy committees. But we want to go when we can meet with the activity, because that's
Yeah.
why, we don't care about the speaker or any of
Yeah,
that.
and especially here, it's local. We make it a day trip.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Are you
perfect.
meeting with the Senate Ag Committee as well, or?
No,
No.
Bobby, no. It gets done in the house. We've always found.
That's how we do it. Well, thanks so much for lunch. That was.
You're
really
quite
nice of you.
welcome. I was- Thank you,
Sounds lovely.
Sidonia. No, good. We'll do it again.